During today's gospel reading, it's important that we understand it in the context of which it is written. So notice how it begins by saying, many of the Jews who had come with Mary and had seen what Jesus did believed in him. So in other words, it's a reference to Mary and Martha, whose brother Lazarus had died, and Jesus had just raised him from the dead. So many of the Jews who had come with Mary and had seen what Jesus did basically ended up believing in him because he's raising the dead. Now it's interesting that the Pharisees, the Jewish leaders, it's kind of like they acknowledge that Jesus is doing all these miracles, but notice what they say, if this man is performing many signs, if we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him, and the Romans will come and destroy both our holy place and our nation. So they recognize that Jesus is doing miracles. They acknowledge this. They recognize that Jesus has a following, and many are choosing to believe in him. Even prominent people that they thought were on their side, because of the resurrection of Lazarus, many had become believers of Jesus. So now they are planning to kill Jesus. Now we heard earlier how they took up stones to kill him, and they wanted him arrested, and those were kind of spontaneous reactions. Oh, this man is blaspheming. We have to do away with him. So there's a difference between a spontaneous reaction, which is still wrong, compared to a plan. In other words, they're planning to kill him, not just on the spur of the moment because they're angry or frustrated with him, but they're actually plotting, planning. And that makes their sin even more grievous. In other words, they are fully aware of what they are doing. And the reality is that very often when we ourselves choose to sin, sometimes it's just a reaction to temptation. We just give in. But sometimes it's also planned, plotted. Oh, I'm going to go here. I'm going to do this or whatever, right? So when we plot our sin, it's much more grievous. When we plan to tell a lie, for example, it's much more grievous than somebody who just bursts out a lie because they're put on the spot or whatever, which is not to say it's okay. But it's important that we understand that when there's this element of planning, of premeditation, much more serious. And this is also recognized in civil society. They talk about premeditated murder, right? You meditated, you dwelt upon it, you thought about it, you planned it out. It's much more grievous than someone who, in a fit of rage, might kill someone. So their sin is grievous, and as I mentioned, we tend to do the same when it comes to our own sins. But notice what they do. So Caiaphas, the high priest of that year, he prophesies. And when he makes this prophecy, it points out that because he's the high priest, his prophecy is actually correct, but not according to his understanding. In other words, the prophecy is that it is better for you to have one man die for the people than to have the whole nation destroyed. Now, this prophecy will be fulfilled according to God's plan to accomplish the salvation of all of mankind. So God does not desire the death of the sinner. God desires to save the sinner. But at the same time, God's justice has to be, the justice of God has to be fulfilled. And Jesus Christ is the person who will fulfill the justice of God because he dies in our place by means of his suffering, but also and especially by means of his infinite charity. He's able to accomplish the forgiveness of all of our sins, or at least make it possible for all of us to have our sins forgiven. So in other words, it's more expedient that Jesus Christ dies in our place than we end up in hell. So this is the fulfillment of the prophecy. In the mind of Caiaphas and the others, they're just really trying to justify their sin. Oh, well, if we don't kill him, well, he's going to have a following, and the Romans are going to come, and they're going to destroy our nation. Not necessarily. Was Jesus's following violent? Was Jesus teaching opposition to the Roman authorities? No. He wasn't doing any of those things. So, in other words, their logic is not justified. Not only that, there were other things that they could have done. They could have spoken to Jesus. They could have interrogated him and wanted to find out more, but they're not interested. They've made up their mind. They're determined that we're going to reject Jesus no matter what, no matter how many miracles, no matter how many Lazarus as he raises from the dead. We have rejected him and we don't want anything to do with him. And this is the height of pride. And like I said, pride blinds us. All of our sins blind us in the spiritual life. And this is very, very unfortunate. And we tend to do the same. Like I said, we tend to justify our sinful behavior. I mean, think, for example, someone who has an abortion. So choosing to sin, when we choose to sin, we often want to justify it. And, what is the logic that the modern world teaches? Oh, it's just a blob of tissue. There's nothing wrong with it. It's not a human being. It's not a human life. Or they make the argument, well, I'm too young, I don't have a job, I'm not even married, it's just too inconvenient, therefore it's okay for me to do this. So not just in regards to abortion, but any decision that we make, when we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing, or when we're choosing to do something wrong, we tend to justify. Oh, I'll just do it one more time. Oh, well, you know what, I'm just so strongly inclined right now, I just have to give in to my sin, and then that strong inclination will go away, so I just need to do it. No, we don't need to do it. So whenever we make choices, we have to be careful, because if we are choosing something that is not good, we often tend to justify it. I mean, it's the typical example is somebody who tells a lie, and often they have to tell another lie in order to justify their first lie, and so on and so on. So they justify their sin afterwards, but sometimes we justify our sins even when we are making that choice to sin. So let us be on guard against this. And because of our pride, sometimes we're just blind to it. Even when it comes to neglecting our prayers. Well, I'm too busy. I have other things to do. Let me just look at this video, this last video, and then once I'm done with that, I'll say my prayers, and then, oh, it's too late now. I'll do it tomorrow. That kind of thing, right? So we tend to do this, and it's not good. And we need to be aware that we tend to do it, and we need to overcome it.